Hi, everyone. My name is Susanna. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, this is such an honor and a privilege to introduce Lainey, our speaker. I came in here not knowing that I was going to introduce her, and I was like, I hope she's going to ask me. She did. Because Lainey is my best friend. And I just love this program because, like what the book talks about, that we are like people stranded after a shipwreck, and the friendships that I have in this program are not defined by age. It's not defined by like jobs or we find each other and we're at different positions in our life and we speak the same language and we process reality the same. And so we're able to connect deeply. And my experience with Lainey's sobriety is that I've known her since before she got her first 1 year coin, or it's her only 1 year coin. I should clarify, but um, I knew her in her first year. We came together during the pandemic on Zoom. We had the same home group. And she from the get-go had something that I wanted, meaning that she was full into this program at a time I have a little bit more sobriety than her, a tiny bit. And it was at a time where I was still dipping my toe. And I saw Lainey just go full in. And I saw the promises coming true, but mostly I saw the joy and the light. And she felt safe to me. She was a safe person for me. And I really think about with Lainey and that what we say is we will love you until you can love yourself. And that is what Lainey is. She's the embodiment of loving me and loving you all until you can love yourself. Something else that I've been able to benefit from through Lainey's sobriety is the gifts of her service. I mean, she is just so dedicated to the newcomer, to the home group. Um, and I really, really just want to emphasize like, she is full in this program, which means that she is a confidential person and she does not have a shitty thing to say about you behind your back. I mean, that's really hard for those of us who have come in very compromised situations and have probably deserved people saying shitty things about us behind our backs, because we were train wrecks. But anyways, the love and healing that I've been able to experience through the program that she works, um, has been tremendous. And then I hope that I take that and then I'm able to bring it to you all, right? That's how it works here. So, with that, it is my honor, joy, and privilege to sit quietly and listen to Lainey's story because it always unfolds for me. There's always something profound for me, and I've heard it a couple times, but her program evolves and changes, and her story always evolves and changes. And so I know I'm going to get something really good today. That's all I got.
Oh, good morning. Hi, everyone. I'm Lainey. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks to Stanley, who I don't think I see. Oh, hi. Thanks to Stanley for asking me to speak today. We traded. Stanley spoke for my home group a couple weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. So thank you for that. I was happy to return the service favor. Always, and thank you, Suzanne, for the beautiful tee up. It's funny when you hear somebody else talk about you because those shoes that she painted sound so much bigger than what I feel like I wear. But thank you so much for that. Um, okay, so I'm gonna start with the 7-step prayer because a friend who I actually believe was Suzanne suggested this when I was like nervous to speak a couple years ago, and it was something her sponsor suggested to her. So if you know the 7-step prayer and would like to say it with me, that'd be great. If not, no worries. But it starts with my creator. I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Thanks for that. Okay, so what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up in a pretty alcoholic family, like for generations on both sides. That seemed very normal. I didn't realize until I was in the program working the steps how deep my obsession with alcohol was. I was obsessed from the time I was a little girl, far before I ever took my first drink, and I didn't realize that, like I said, until after I got sober. But when I was a little kid, looking up to my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, and it just seemed like so much fun. And the drinking age in our family was 13. And all of my cousins, there's a 7-year gap between like a big cluster of like my older cool cousins and myself. So they were all able to drink much earlier at these family events. And my favorite aunt would, when I would finish a Pepsi, she'd put just like a little beer in there for me so that I could like feel a part of. And that was my impression of alcohol very early on, was like that was what we did, that's who we were, and that's what you needed to do to sit at the table with the big kids and be a part of. Um, and I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to turn 13 and start drinking all the time publicly. And I was able to start on my own a little before that. But another story that always sticks out to me early on, of like a red flag of my alcoholism, was when I was probably 10 or 11. My best friend and I stole a beer from my dad's fridge downstairs. And it was, I'm from Pittsburgh. It was an Iron City Light. So if anybody happens to know icy light beer, it's not very great beer to begin with. And we hid it in the basement until there was a chance that we could be alone to drink it. And it was like summer, like a couple months in the summer. And by the time that we go to drink it, it was skunk and disgusting. And I loved it, but I loved the whole part of it. I loved being secretive. I loved bonding with my friend over that. I loved like feeling like I was doing something wrong and getting away with it. There was so much of more than just like drinking the actual beer that went into that experience for me. And then when I was 11 or 12, my parents had always been on and off, and they broke up for good. And it was great. It was freedom for me because I could be anywhere at 11 or 12 years old, and neither of them were talking to each other. So I could say I was here, and, they would never find out. I was able to kind of do whatever I wanted. And that's when, I was able to start drinking all the time. A friend of mine, her sister had just gotten an apartment, and I guess thought it would be cool to get us some alcohol. And she got us, I just remember drinking a whole 6-pack of green apples Smirnoff Ice, and I threw up everywhere. And like that was my moment where I was like, I have arrived. I was not like, oh my God, I never want to do this again. I was like, I can't wait to do this every weekend. And that was then what I did. And it was a lot of fun. It was honestly everything that I had built it up in my head to be. I felt cool and hot and confident, and I was a big party girl, and that was a lot of fun for a long time, of course, until it wasn't. And when it stopped becoming fun for me was when I had just turned 21, actually, and I moved down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with um, my boyfriend at the time. And he was also super alcoholic, but we were still in the fun phases of it. So we just had like a ton of fun together. But we were out drinking one afternoon on the water for a friend's birthday, and just a freak accident. He got like hit by a boat and died that day. And I just remember drinking was never fun after that. And I thought that it was because he died and that wasn't supposed to happen. And I lost my drinking buddy, and I was so young, and this was so unfair, and blah blah blah. And now in hindsight, like, not to take away from, that's obviously a tragic, and he's still missed by his family and friends every day. Even, it's been 13 years now. But for me, what I realized was that that was when my solution of alcohol stopped working. And it was slowly, it was really starting to get in the way of our relationship, and my life before that. But that was whenever it really went downhill. And I clung on to that. I nursed onto that, that thing that happened to me, and like 6, 7 years down the line, I'm still on the floor getting drunk, crying about my boyfriend that died 7 years ago. And people are like, it's not really, that's card's not really working anymore. But I held on to that for a long time. And I remember being in Myrtle Beach still, and I was having breakfast, which was some kind of cheap Pinot Grigio with orange juice and an American Spirit cigarette because I quit smoking Newports because I was trying to be healthier. And my dad didn't know that when he was on the phone with me. And when I say morning, it was like probably 11 or 12. And so he was like, you can't just wallow in this forever. And I was so offended when he said that. And I felt so misunderstood. But a part of me knew that he was right. And so I got my stuff together. I packed up. I went back home to Pittsburgh. And I told myself then, I'm like, I'm just going to go back, kind of lick my wounds, heal, and then get out of there within 5 years, because I knew that's not where I wanted to be. And it got even worse there. It just got so much worse there. And I needed it to, I needed it to. And so as I'm back there, context of the situation too, this is probably 2014, 2015. I'm not sure what it was like here at that time, but in Pennsylvania and on the East Coast, the opioid epidemic or pandemic was really on the rise. And I had so many friends who started doing pills, myself included. And I remember them being like, I would like get sick and I really didn't like it. And they were like, just keep taking it, it'll get better. And I was like, this sucks. I don't like this. I like drinking and doing cocaine. That was way more fun for me than the pills. But a lot of other people got on pills, which then led to heroin. And I had friends that were like dying left and right from heroin overdoses. And I knew that I knew my life was bad, but again, it wasn't because of the drinking. Like I just could not make that connection. It was because that boyfriend died. It was because my parents sucked. It was because, we didn't have money. It was because of all these other things. Um, but I never felt like I had the right to be in these rooms because like those people had the problem. The people doing heroin and the hard drugs and stuff, like they had the problem. I just drank too much and hated my life. And that kept me sick for a long time, much longer than I needed to be. But there was a part of me that wanted to get better. I knew that there was more for life in me than this. And the other benefit or gratitude I find in that the death of that boyfriend, and I think a lot of us probably experience this in the pandemic. Whenever there's something like life shattering like that, it really makes you look at your life and like, what am I doing here? Like, what should I be doing here? Like, what is the meaning? What is my purpose in all of this? So that question kept kind of rooting in me, and I knew that there was more to life than the way that I was living. So I went back to school at community college, and and I think it's page 31 that was read today when it talks about all the things we have tried. I mean, I was trying all of those things. I was watching a TED Talk every morning when I woke up. I was reading every self-help book under the sun. I was getting certifications and going to the gym and like trying to do all these things on the outside to make my life feel better. And then eventually I did get to the point where I was making deals with drinking and my higher power at the time. I would like do these mantras and write it out that I'm only going to have this many drinks when I go out, and I would only bring cash with me so that I would run out of cash, and then I would think that, oh, I can stop drinking when I run out of cash. And somehow I would always end up waking up the next day somewhere else with someone I didn't know in a place that, and it's just like, how the hell do I keep getting here? Um, so this gap between who I wanted to be with like, I was trying to rein it into like at least Monday through Friday, going back to school, working a couple jobs, reading these books. And then I would go out on the weekend and I would just feel like I took 5 to 10 steps backwards. And this gap between who I wanted to be and who I actually was just kept getting bigger and bigger, and darker and darker. And then one of the last like big self-help things I did, I committed to working with this life coach out of California. And she got like, really fluffy's probably not the right word, but really fluffy with me. I was like, what do you really want to do? And I was like, I really I feel like my life calling is to help addicts and alcoholics. I'm like my mom and my sister, I've been so helpful to them, and they struggle with this stuff. And I really think I could be good at this. And she said, you should go to Alcoholics Anonymous. They've been getting people sober successfully for a very long time. And I was like, I know just the person to call. And so that boyfriend who died, his dad is still a very active and avid member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had been to AA, when I was a teenager. I would drive my mom when she had her DUIs, and then I had my own DUI earlier in my 20s. And I had been, and it wasn't for me. And even that boyfriend's dad and his kid and his friends who were all in AA, they were so much fun. There was something very comfortable when I was around them. Um, and I just always kind of figured like that's for them and that will work for them, but like that's not my problem. That's not for me. So anyway, I call him and tell him that my life coach suggested this. And I'm so grateful for his experience and the way that he 12-step me, because he had made jokes in the past that he was saving me and his son seats. And there was not a hint of that, when I called him. There was not a hint of like, finally, or, oh, okay, your life coach told you to, whatever. He simply invited me over for a cup of coffee and said he would answer any questions that I had. And he gave me a big book, which is his, and I still have today. Um, and he was like, just read it and see what you think. And here's some meetings that you can go to. And so I started going to a speaker meeting. It was a Friday night speaker meeting. And I hated it. I hated it so bad. I went in and there was people that I knew there and they were like, "Oh, you're here finally. Like it's so good to see you." And I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm not here for me. Like my life coach told me to come." And they're like, "Okay, all right, no problem. Like still glad to see you. Glad you're here." And I was the last one in, first one out, and I just hated it. I thought AA was very cliquey, and I thought, then I found all these reasons to not like it. But meanwhile, I wasn't raising my hand and saying that I was new. I wasn't staying for any of the fellowship. I wasn't trying, I wasn't creating that fellowship that I craved. Instead, I was finding all of the reasons to find why AA was not gonna work for me and why I didn't need to be there. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, thank God I don't have to go to those meetings anymore. But I kept reading the big book. And when I got to that page of like all the things we have tried, I remember exactly where I was. I was on my knees in my bedroom, and it just felt like a ton of bricks fell on me. And that was a truth that couldn't unsee at that point. And I was like, shit, there might be something here. And then so the pandemic hit, um, and I had plans to move to Montana in June of 2020, and this was like, um, I started going to meetings in December, and I think they started closing down like February-ish. And somehow I continued to not drink. I was really crazy. I was really crazy, but I didn't drink for a few months. And I think the pandemic really helped with that for me. And I was just so excited to move to Montana and start this new life and get a fresh slate. And so I get out here, and a good friend of mine from Pittsburgh was really struggling with meth. And I was like, I don't know a ton about meth. I've been wanting to try a meeting out here. I'm like, we can hop on a Zoom meeting. So we did. We hopped on the Missoula Oasis Persists virtual online meeting, and she didn't stay. She has made her way back, which makes me very happy, but she didn't stay for a while. But I did. After attending that meeting, some woman put her number in the chat for sponsorship. And I don't even think that she had her camera on or a picture of herself up. And I text her number and I said, hey, I'd like to learn about sponsorship. And I don't know exactly why I did that, because I still wasn't thinking that I was an alcoholic. I really think it was because this is what the life coach told me to do. And I paid the life coach and I got skin in the game for it. And the people pleaser in me, like I want to look good. I want to do what, I don't want to show up not doing the stuff that you asked me or told me to do, because I feel like that will make me look bad. So I get on a call with this woman, And she starts telling me a bit about her story, and so much is clicking, you know, and I'm even kind of resentful at the way that she looks, because that's how I used to like to look. And at this stage, I was trying to change everything about myself to just get it right. You know, I had like cut all my hair off and dyed it a different color, and I was not wearing makeup, and like I was just trying to change all these physical things of me because I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And I was just seeing these like alignments with her. And so I know it's, they, like we say in the rooms a lot, you know, look for someone who has what you want. And I hadn't heard that at the time. And I'm glad that I didn't, because I don't know that that advice would have worked for me, because I didn't want what any of you guys had. Like, you guys weren't drinking, and I didn't want that. You know, I just wanted to be able to drink and enjoy my life, because I couldn't imagine a life without drinking. Um, and that phrase even still, like, just it just wouldn't have made sense to me then. So I know that my higher power was somewhere in that, because that woman is my sponsor still to this day, and has impacted my life profoundly. And I could have never known what I needed in a sponsor. So it just worked out really well. So anyway, in that meeting, she tells me a bit about herself, asks me about my story, and then she asks that I get a notebook and a pen and write a couple things down. And it was attend 4 to 7 meetings a week, you know, reach out to 2 to 3 women a week, read pages 83 through 88, 98, and 100 in the morning, say this third step, seventh step prayer. And I think that was it. And she was like, how do you feel after reading that list? And I was like, that seems like a lot. Like, I don't even really think I'm an alcoholic. I don't think that that's necessary. But again, the people pleasing defect in me has definitely worked as an asset sometimes in this program, because I started doing it. And after like the third or fourth day of reading those pages over and over again, I'm like, all right, I get it. Um, I don't think I need to keep doing this, but I did. And I'm so glad that I did, because to this day, that's like that's a part of my program. I don't necessarily read those pages every day, but when I wake up at 3 in the morning and it feels like there's a big dark demon just sitting on my chest, like cackling me, which doesn't happen nearly as much now as it used to, but it still does. You know, I wake up at 3 in the morning, I'm just like, oh God, thinking of who knows what, you know, like those pages, I now know them by memory, and I'll say them in my head, and it kind of like helps rock me back to sleep. So I'm really grateful for that baseline that she gave me to go off of. And it wasn't until she told me, you know, we'll meet weekly for an hour, and we'll read the book together, and we'll work the steps in them or we'll work the steps as we get to them in the book. And I'm really grateful that our only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, because if I had to decide that I was an alcoholic before I got here, before I even started reading the book and working with a sponsor, I probably wouldn't be here today. My pride was just too big. Um, so yeah, that was when everything changed for me, because I had read a good bit of the big book before then. I was even trying to do like a fourth step on my own, and like watching these YouTube videos and stuff. And it was just a completely different experience with a sponsor. So I do highly recommend working with a sponsor who also has a sponsor to go through the steps with. Um, and so steps 1, 2, and 3, I felt like were kind of slow getting to in the book, and like reading Bill's story. And I didn't really, the first time I read Bill's story, I was like, I don't see much alignment. And now today, when I read Bill's story, I can see a lot of connection, particularly, you know, when he talks about the way that he felt emotionally after drinking. And I remember realizing that, like, when me and my friends would go out, and then the next morning, like, you know, if we were at brunch or something, and they would talk about like how funny something was, and I had to pretend like I knew what we were talking about, but the truth was, you know, I was um no, you're good. The truth was, I didn't remember what happened, and I would have to try to play along and pretend. And I just remember sitting at that brunch table, um, wanting to kill myself, truly just wanting to kill myself, wanting to die, wanting to put myself out of my misery. And they were having a completely different experience. And I was like, oh, we don't drink the same. This is not the same for me as it is for them. Um, and so 1, 2, and 3 felt slow. And one, I mean, I'm still having to come to a meeting and say, you know, I'm Lainey, I'm an alcoholic. I need that reminder, and I need to hear other people's stories because I'm continuing to understand, even 5 years in, how powerless I am over this, how unmanageable my life is. And I don't get that if I don't show up here. Four, gonna be honest, I was really, really excited to get to four because I love self-help books. I love doing self-help stuff. And I was just sure that because I'm obsessed with myself, right? And like I was sure that after I did the fourth step, like I was gonna get the things I wanted. My husband was gonna come into my life and I was gonna get kids and all the things that I thought would make me live happily ever after. And the really funny thing with the steps in my experience is that it has never gone how I expect it to go. And I got to the fourth step, and my sponsor had suggested to work on it 20 minutes a day, every day. And I thought that was going to be no problem for me. And it turned out to be kind of a big problem. I was like, well, I can't do it till my house is clean. And like, I would just find all these other things to do before I got it done. And the fourth step is like, it's so miserable to sit in. It just felt like I pooped my pants and was just sitting in it for like a month, because what we think about expands. And when I'm just thinking about all the shit that has been caused me to be resentful and fearful and um that's just where my focus kept expanding to. So if you're not on your fourth step yet, I do recommend to try to get through it as fast as possible, and you'll keep learning, be as thorough as you can, but you'll keep learning. And so finally, oh, and the other thing that I remember, a piece of advice I got that was really helpful with the fourth step, because when I came in here, I was like, I don't really have any resentments. I'm not really an angry person, and not true. And what somebody had told me, that a resentment is not necessarily thinking about like what has made me mad about this, but like whatever, when there's a situation or a person or a thing that like in my just like gives me a in my gut, or like makes me feel um I don't know if that's helpful, but for some reason it was really helpful for me when he said, when it gives you like that I was like, oh, okay. Like I don't know the name of that feeling, but I get that feeling a lot. And that was helpful for me to open up a bit more. And then when I was coming to the end, when I thought I was coming to the end of my fourth step, and my sponsor was like, okay, like how many lines do you have? Blah, blah, blah. And she was like, what about murderers? What about rapists? What about pedophiles? And I was like, what? Like, I, I mean, yeah, sure. I probably have resentments and fears and stuff against those people. And she's like, okay, then they should be on your list. And I didn't see that connection at the time. And it wasn't until, actually, I don't know exactly when, for me in those steps, but what that helped me realize was that the grace of God is not too big for anybody, and that there's no saying that I couldn't be, based on situations or scenarios, that I couldn't be in the right or wrong states to like also do, some of those things that I thought before was just like, well, yeah, of course, that would be things that I would be resentful at. So it really helped expand my mind and heart to like how big the grace of God is, and how, as a human, I'm not immune from doing and acting in ways that I wouldn't expect myself to do and act. So fifth step, I don't remember having a big like relaxed feeling after the fifth step. If anything, I felt a little worse because I was like, oh, I wrote all this stuff down and that was one thing, but then sharing it, like I just had this awful vulnerability hangover. And it just, I felt worse before I felt better. And then 6 and 7, I struggle with 6 and 7 because they don't feel as action oriented as 4 and 5 does. And after I got 4 and 5 down, I was doing them a lot, to the point where my sponsor was like, okay, we've done this. And you need to lean into 6 and 7 too. Like you can't fix your own problems. You need God, you need the solution, and God will remove when it's ready. And it's not really up to us when you're ready to have those removed. The best you can do is just work your program, work your steps, and be ready. Which still feels kind of hard today. And so, and then 8 and 9, um, for the 8th step, we took everybody that was on my 4th step. And that was also kind of eye-opening. And I just sponsor people the way that my sponsor has sponsored me. And they're like, well, how do I make an amends to an institution or, an idea, like these other things that I was resentful at? And in my experience, I still wrote out an amends the same way I would to a person. And I just, it was suggested that I get on my knees and say that prayer to God and make a living amends, like just not holding that stuff with you or whatever that might look like. There's just so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom in 8 and 9. And I got a little overzealous with 9 too. There would be stuff that popped up that I was like, oh, I feel like I should make an amends for this. And thank God for sponsorship and the accountability, because she would hear me and then she'd pause for a while and she'd say, did you actually do anything wrong here? Or do you just kind of like want to show off that you're sober and doing really well to this person? I was like, that's a good point. That's a good point. Um, so I'm so grateful for sponsorship and that accountability and the program that she works in those situations. And then 10, 11, and 12, those obviously continue on. 10 is so powerful. And for me with 10, I can always pick out resentments really easy. Resentments like, and sometimes it's as simple as just as it says in the book, when I catch myself feeling resentful, I will just literally say, God, I'm really effing resentful right now. Like, please remove this from me and show me how I can be helpful. I never, ever, ever expect that to work. And like, usually it does. Usually, like within an hour or two, I'm like, oh, like I notice that I just like all of a sudden feel better. Sometimes it's deeper than that, and I'll have to dig through it a little more. But and fear can kind of be easy for me to pick up on the day to day. But 10 and 11 go so hand in hand with me, because if I don't do 11 in the morning, it gets really hard for me to pick out, 10 throughout the day. So doing that prayer and meditation in the morning helps set that scene for it. And it used to have to feel so serious. Like I would have to get on my knees and I would have to like have these big long meditations. And it's still lovely when I can do that, but I don't necessarily have the time and space to do that every day. So even if it's something when I'm in bed in between my snoozes of alarms, and like just going through a list of things that I'm grateful for, and thanking God for that, and saying the 3rd step, 7th step prayer, it's just like something like I think in the beginning I needed to make that big of a deal out of prayer and meditation. But as long as I'm doing something to just bring God into my life, into my morning, my days always seem to go a lot better. And recently, an experience that I had with the 10th step, which I'm looking at the clock and I'm going to try to not get it, because it's like the details are kind of mundane, but I think that's something that's really cool about this program and this solution is that it's like it can be painted in the book, and it talks about in that appendix of the spiritual experience, like there's many stories in the book where it's like painted as this big bright white light experience. And not all of us experience it that way. For a lot of us, and I'm definitely the same way, the slow educational type, where in time, like this white light just kind of keeps unfolding and keeps getting bigger and bigger. But I do think it's really cool that even in these small, mundane details of my days, I can find it if I'm working it. So probably like a month or so ago, at work, I was working with this older gentleman, and it's like not even really a part of my job, but like I have some experience in this space, so I was trying to be helpful. And he, big ego guy, and something, I don't know, something happened, and he just went off, and he was like putting my big boss and other people on these email, like I felt verbally abused by this guy, and I felt like he was trying to hang me out to dry for like everybody to see, and that I didn't have a lot of support. Nobody was like, well, hey, let's calm down here. And that's what I wanted, right? I had kind of unrealistic expectations of how other people should have handled that situation for me. So anyway, working through a 10th step, okay, obviously I'm pretty resentful here, and I had to take it through all of them. Okay, where am I being resentful? Where am I being fearful? Where am I being selfish? Where am I being self-seeking? And something that's been helpful for me in the difference between selfish and self-seeking is like, okay, so selfish is, where am I only thinking of myself here? Where am I not thinking of It turns out his sister was really sick, and who knows what else is going on in his day I don't know about. All I'm thinking about is how this is affecting me, versus self-seeking is like, what hat is my ego trying to wear right now? The victim tends to be the victim, and like the veiler or the hero tend to be the two biggest hats that my ego likes to wear. And so I had to take it through all of those. And then the other part, the dishonest part, um, that piece has been so powerful for me, because I never thought that I was a big liar, or that like I would have never considered myself dishonest. But when I was encouraged to look at it the lens through hypocrisy, that was really eye-opening for me. So where have I done this before? Where have I acted like this before? Where have I thought like this before? And that always, because I can always find that. I can always find that. Even if I've not outwardly done the action, like I know when I've thought that way and felt that way and wanted to do that action, right? So that always kind of like levels the playing field between me and whoever I'm mad at. And everybody really, it's like helps me have a lot of compassion and understanding. And so I realized that I had acted this way when it comes to medical bills and insurance and doctors. That is like the biggest resentment that I just have been chewing on for years now. I get so furious every time I get an insurance bill, because I'm like, I'm paying all this insurance, and I go to the doctor and the doctor didn't even freaking help me. And now I got to pay hundreds of dollars. Like, for what? And I feel so valid and justified in that. And when I call the representative to bitch about it, I would be so mean, I would go off on them in ways that it's like, and I know it wasn't their fault, and I just couldn't control my anger. And I couldn't see that until this guy was doing this to me. And so fast forward to a couple weeks later, I get I get a big medical bill. And they told me, this doctor's office called my insurance. They said it was going to be covered. Insurance was like, nope, just kidding. We're not covering it. And I'm like, so then I'm rushing into fear, because like I just bought a house, and I don't have the money. I don't have this $1,000 for this right now. And like spiraling. And like, I feel like I just kind of dug my heels in, and it's like, okay, we're not gonna like, I just refuse to live that way anymore. Like, and I don't have to live that way anymore with the steps and the solution. So like, process it, doing my best to just lean back into my solution. And I give myself some time to cool off. And then I reach out to the woman, the billing manager at that doctor's office. And I just said, hey, I got this bill. I'm a little confused. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And I, tried to be as nice as I could. I'm like, thanks for your help in advance for this. And she messaged me back like a day or two later, and she was like, thanks so much for your patience. My dad just died. I'm in Oklahoma for that. And I was like, right then and there, I was like, thank God I was not an asshole to this person, because you just never know. And then just earlier this week, I got another email from her that said, hey, Dr. So and so and I have decided to like wipe this bill out for you. Like, you won't be responsible for it. And I was like, whoa, whoa, I wasn't expecting. I've never heard or seen of a doctor do that. Like, and that's not what I was expecting. That's not why. It's not like, and that was definitely a mentality that I had early on in sobriety, where it was like kind of how I mentioned with the fourth step. Like, I was willing to do the work because I thought there was something great for me on the other end of it. And usually there is. Usually there is a great gift on the other end of the work. But I was willing to pay if I had to. I knew that God would help me find the money if I needed it, and that's something else that has come up big with like this scarcity mentality and the money wounds that I have, because it's kind of crazy to me that I can trust God to save my life in ways that, I mean, I tried everything to not drink. I tried everything that I possibly could. And yet I show up here and I work this program and I go to meetings, and like somehow like I hardly even think about drinking anymore. I mean, sometimes like I'm still an alcoholic. So sometimes I'll see a drink, or it's a nice day or it's not a nice day, and I'm like, oh, this would taste really good or something. But like, that's so fleeting now. And also, where in the beginning that was like terrifying. But now it's so fleeting, and I hardly think about alcohol, and thinking that like the first 27 years of my life revolved around, when am I going to drink? What am I going to wear when I'm drinking? Who am I going to see drink? Like, just constant. And now like that is so wiped from me that I'm like, it's crazy that I can trust this higher power with that. And it proves that it can help me with that. But when it comes to money, or when it comes to my romantic relationships, I'm like, it's not going to deliver. My higher power is not going to deliver here. And I realized that I have this underlying belief, and I didn't grow up in church, so I don't know exactly where it came from, but I have this underlying belief that like God's will for me, that like God wants me to be small and poor and sexless and just like lame and like quiet and whatever. And that is so not true. So that had really that had made me really hesitant of like giving my will and my life over to God. It's like, okay, I'll give it to you for this, but it's like, if you want me to be poor, I don't know that this is gonna work, you know? And that's just not true. And I had read a book from Emmett Fox, Sermon on the Mount, a couple years ago, and it really changed a lot in my sobriety. And if you're not familiar with Emmett Fox was a spiritual teacher way back in the day that Bill and other early members were very influenced by. And this book in particular was what I had heard, so which is why I read it. And it really is like, whoa, does it paint things? It just gave me so much perspective. But in that book, you know, he says that God's will for us will always lead to more freedom, like a bigger, brighter experience, more abundance, greater service to others. And I was like, wow, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that and know that. And so now, you know, when I'm fearful about money or anything, like I just welcome God into it. I say, hey, I invite you into this. And like sometimes that's all I can do, but I know that I'm going to be okay. And I know it might not look the way that I want it to look, but I also know that my higher power, what it's got for me is so much better than what I can have for myself. And I heard somebody say recently, that their prayer was to help me love the path that you have for me. And I loved that. I loved that, you know, because there's so much, the higher power thing, the God thing, I think can be so difficult because how can we put words or, you know, how can we put like our human words around this thing that it's like, you just can't, you know? And I think that's why it gets so funky along the way. But, um, my experience with this is that I am going to be taken care of, no matter what, no matter what. And the the other way where it's weird, where it's like, if you want what we have, and it's like you talk about these things, and it's like I don't know who want like it's such a personal, intimate experience that I don't know how to like when I say this that somebody's going to be like, yeah, I want to cry to a Darius Rucker song when I'm going to the grocery store because I feel so good, you know? It's like what? That didn't seem that appealing, but literally, you know, last weekend I was driving to the grocery store and it's a beautiful morning and this song about, I don't know, having a roof over your head and shoes on your feet. And I'm just like weeping like a baby. I'm like, oh, my life is so good. You know, it's so good. And it's not perfect all the time. I still have mood swings and I'm so humbled by my hormones and everything else that just I don't have control over, but I have a baseline today that I didn't have before. And like, somebody was sending me a picture of this gorgeous owl that was landed outside, and like they had this like staring contest with this owl for like 20 minutes, she said. And I was like, whoa, that's like what an experience. And she was like, yeah, I googled like, and the spiritual meaning says like this all these wonderful things. And then she's like, or it's an omen and I'm totally screwed, and like and I just don't have those fears anymore, you know? Like I know bad things or quote unquote bad things are going to happen, but I also know that if I stick or we stick in the solution in the program, like eventually it's going to turn to good. Like some awful things. I'm blown away by there's a woman in a meeting I go to, and I'm just blown away by her ability to she's had some nasty things happen throughout her life, particularly in her childhood, you know, with people who are loving you and supposed to take care of you. And like the way that she's able to share about it in such a safe and protected way, but so that other people can know, like, because she knows she's not alone in that, right? And it's like, you don't have to be alone in it either. And it's like to have these what seem like awful, awful, horrific things happen to us and then be able to turn it to good and like literally save somebody else from it. I mean, it's such a gift. It's such a gift. Um, and 12, I don't want to forget about 12. Obviously, that's a really big one. Working with others. I was encouraged early on by my sponsor to start sponsoring as soon as possible. And as long as I was further ahead in the book than they were, that would be fine. And she would help me with everything else. And that was very, very helpful for me. because working with other people, it really does, like going through the steps by myself with my sponsor, was, like two-dimensional, and then working with other people, I mean, it just opens up a whole different dimension, a whole different world. Um, and so my home group is still that Zoom group that I got sober with in the pandemic, and it's changed a lot over the last couple years, but I feel very loyal to it. But one of the benefits that I really like about it is there's so many different people that are on Zoom. So I feel like I have a much bigger opportunity to sponsor people and work with newcomers through Zoom than I do in person. And I now live in Stevensville, in a small town like Stevensville. Not that there's not still newcomers and that I don't want to be available in person, but I feel like a lot more access to newcomers via Zoom. And yeah, I've just gotten so much. It's so I don't have the words exactly. It's just very rewarding, and I can't see things until sometimes, you see it through somebody else, and it's just a really beautiful. It's a great program, you guys. Keep coming back. Just seeing if there's anything else that needs to be said. I think that was pretty much it, though. I have a really beautiful life that I could have never planned as well on my own. And to the average person, it probably looks pretty average, but it is pretty spectacular, from the inside, from the way that I see and experience things. And all of that is a direct correlation to my participation in this program, and the gifts of this program. And I feel like what I put into it is, I mean, it's pebbles compared to the gifts that I get back from it. So, um, if you're new, I hope you come back till you find something that works. It's funny because, like, when Suzanne was talking about when she met me and I was all in, I talked shit on AA for like decades. I talked a lot of shit on AA, for a long time. And I didn't like it. I didn't like what you guys were doing here. I thought it was weird. I thought it was culty. I thought, but like, somewhere along the line, one of the seeds that were planted finally came. So, yeah, if I think that's all I got. Thanks everybody for being here and let me share.